publicly or truthfully. So we will keep pointing these things out. I saw a major response again, in fact, a feeble response by APNU saying, oh, they change the environment. What is Jagdeo talking about? He mentioned taxes too, and how that has changed. What is Jagdeo talking about? We did a number of great things on taxation. And I pointed out, that there were over 200 new taxes and fees introduced or increased by APNU. If you go to the back of every budget speech made by Jordan, and you look at the annex, or one of them, you will find a long list of measures increasing taxes. So I thought it's 200. And Ferguson asked us to present in Parliament the list that we were exaggerating. When we actually counted, it came up to over 350 measures. Things that were increased. So there was a VAT on healthcare that was not there before. So VAT on education that was not there before. VAT on water that was not there before. VAT on electricity that was not there before. VAT on data, VAT on internal travel, on freight to the interior. I can go down the long list of things. Look at the fees, basic fees to vend. If you had a vehicle and you were vending from the vehicle, the license went from $15,000 Ghana per year to $65,000 per year. This was for ordinary people. Almost every fee was raised. We dealt with the ones already for pesticides and fertilizer and machinery and equipment. Who taxes machinery and equipment when they'll add to the productive capacity of the country? And shamelessly, in September of 2024, trying to defend the indefensible and lying about it. And that gets passed off and gets reported without even a question asked of the people who say this sort of stuff. So every week we have the task of coming back to press conferences like the one I'm having here or in the public domain and repeating what we said before. And sometimes it becomes repetitive and boring, as I said before, but we have to keep doing it in this serious, coordinated attempt to hide the history of the 5 years. And of course, we don't want to go back to the 28 years because that's way back in the past, but it tells you a lot about what happens in the 5 years. So we have a Marvin Williams saying the PPP is preparing to rig the elections, going back to the same old voters list argument, and nobody believes him because they've seen it happen before. In 2015, same voters list. In 2020, it's the same voters list. 660,000 people on the voters list, 460 voted. And they all vote with robust safeguards at each polling place. The polling agents of all the parties signed on to the statements of poll. The only party that has not released its statements of poll as yet is APNU. Keep claiming they won the elections. And so last week I asked if the AFC were to have a press conference, would someone ask them if they still hold the position that it is the PPP who rigged the 2020 elections and brought in the Russians to do so? because Cathy Hughes and Ramjatan were saying that, if they still hold that view. And why is it that they're telling people now on the ground that APNU did it and their hands were clean, but because they were part of the coalition, they had to defend the theft, that they didn't see anything. That's what they're telling people on the ground. So they would have defended the stealing of the elections. This is the spineless, characterless nature of the people who are in the AFC. They lie prolifically. So we come to a few things today. I was actually shocked that I read a newspaper story, I think it's kind of standard. And I was shocked because I didn't realize that Nigel Hughes actually referred to his wife as a lowlife. So the headline says, Cathy Hughes tells court her husband referred to her as a lowlife on Facebook. So this is, I saw Nigel Hughes subsequently attempting through a set of frantic posts, several of them, try to explain the context in which he did that. Now, this is the person who defined low life as all sorts of things, in the ethnic sense, because I criticize her because she's of African descent, that it has connotations of a loose woman, and all sorts of things. He put those definitions in the lawsuit that he filed against me. And to refer to your wife, even jocularly, in the manner, since you defined it as such, my definition was different. I felt she was dishonorable because she lied on me. So he said, oh, there was a context to this all. He was doing it jokingly. But having defined it thus, even if you jocularly refer to your wife in that manner, it's demeaning. Now, he then posted again. So what happened in cross-examination, and most of you are aware of what I'm talking about. So at a press conference that I had at the office of the president, I said that Cathy Hughes went to Linden in the middle of the tense situation with Venezuela. And she spoke at a public gathering, and she said that I implied that I, as a former president, undermined Guyana's position on the border, and that I had offered a channel to Venezuela. She referred to me as being evil and all sorts of things in that meeting. So at the press conference, I said, even if you want to criticize me on an issue here, we're fighting now for our country together. The leader of the opposition, we had full solidarity on the not border issue. You should not distort a position that I took for partisan interests when the national interest is at stake. So I was critical of that, and then I also said, this is rich coming from someone who in her own ministry was giving contracts to her own company and signing off on payments to her company while signing checks on behalf of the company. That this was low-life behavior. So they did two things. They wrote the ERC saying that I made disparaging ethnic statements about her, which is false. You should look at the whole press conference. and then they filed a lawsuit against me. The ERC considered the matter, and they found no merit in it. Absolutely no merit in it. So Cathy Hughes, on the cross-examination, admitted that I never referred to her gender or her ethnicity at the press conference. Never did. Secondly, she admitted that the question of the offer of the channel was not done by me. It was done long before I became president. So she admitted to that too. And she also said her husband also referred to her as low-life. These are all under cross-examination. So as I said before, Nigel Hughes came on and he was explaining the context with which the context in which he called her a low-life. But then he reposted the same clip that they could not put in the defense. He reposted the clip of me talking when we had just come out of government about this issue on the channel. And so let me read the Chronicle quotation. Now, this was Chronicle, October 24, 2015. This was APNU in government. And they quoted what I said. So, well, we gather that there are several other options available to the Secretary General. That is the UN Secretary General. I don't want to say much about the options, but let me say I'm in a very difficult position to comment on this issue basically. But there were other options that involved a negotiated settlement. Negotiated settlement which did not see any land concession, that the 1899 award would remain intact. But there was one view that you could probably, on the maritime area, give Venezuela a channel to the sea. So I said there was one view. Not that I'm offering the Venezuela, but there was one view that you could probably, in the maritime area, give Venezuela a channel out to the sea. So I was commenting on what took place before me as president, because they had actually offered that under APNU. And it's in the pleadings before the UN, the ICJ. Venezuela inserted that. We know who made that offer now, and it was done when APNU was in government. I didn't say I'm giving a channel. I said there was one view. So guess what the video that Nigel Hughes is circulating now starts with? They take out, but there was one view. And it starts with, you could probably, in the maritime area, give Venezuela a channel out to the sea. That's where they clip it, and that's what they've posted now. So he is upset that his comment about his wife being a low-life is taken out of context. But he, in the same breath, the same post, edits the video to start it at a point where it made I look like I was suggesting this. When in their own chronicle at that time, this was what was quoted. This was what my quotation was. So it's the dishonesty of people like Nigel Hughes, totally dishonest. He could joke about his wife being a low-life and make it look like it's ethnic. She's a politician. She was criticizing me. I was responding to her behavior. That was low-life behavior. And it's dishonorable behavior. And if you think about low-life, if you look at this movie, Heart of Stone, I was watching an action movie recently, and And you know, there's the charter there, and the head of the charter was referring to the childhood of this Alia Bhatt, who is an Indian movie star, who was in the movie. And she said that basically that she had a tough life, tough childhood, that she grew up with low lives. I don't think they were referring to anybody, ethnicity, etc. The standard usage. But I'm in court facing that, but now I'm glad, in fact, that they actually sued me, because they're very thin-skinned. She could, as a politician, call people satire girl, and you know the history of satire girl, call them all sorts of things, Priya Manichan, all the time. But I didn't refer to her ethnicity. I said she was a lowlife because she lied on me to the people in Linden, knowing that and she admitted in court that she knew that the offer was made before. So this is something that happens all the time. And then he, in his own defense, goes out to say, oh, there was a context. However, he lies again on me by clipping the TikTok, I think, by editing it to leave out the most critical part, to say there was a view, not that I offered, there was a view that this could be done. But we're looking forward to additional material being presented. And by the way, for the first time, Cathy Hughes has admitted in court that she gave her own company. And let me go back to this video mega thing, because when this matter came out in the public domain, that she owned the company and the company was benefiting from government contracts in her own ministry, she lied to the press and said, I had left the company since 2015. I have no association with the company. Not that she didn't own it, but she had no association with it. And then in 2018, we found that she was still signing checks on behalf of the company. How can you leave a company and sign the checks on behalf of the company? And now this is the same company that was getting large number of contracts in her own ministry, and she had to approve the payment now for her own company. So she's signing checks for the company, and then on the other hand, as minister, she's approving. And that didn't constitute corruption. That wasn't corruption. Without any tender whatsoever, no. There was no tendering system under APNU. So all we talk about today, we talk a lot about, oh, what's going on, the tender is not evaluated properly. If you assess that period, people were called in. Look at the 1.6 billion that was spent on the facility behind in Coffee Square. What it's called again? The stadium or whatever they built there, Durban Park project. That was 1.6 billion. Where did you see any tender? 600 million is still missing. So I can go back through that long history, which I don't want to do today. But for all of those who, including Nigel Hughes, he did an interview and he said, we believe that some of the contractors have to pay 30% to people. So let him find the contractors and bring them. He's a lawyer, and expose them. He speaks in generic terms. Did they have to pay anything to Vidya Mega? We could easily say that. You didn't have to even pay anything. You were getting the contracts yourself. All government contracts going to a company owned by Cathy Hughes. So today they can come up with any number of issues. So I see also the whole thing about the cybercrime regulations, that Anil Nandalal spoke of our intention to bring cybercrime regulations to make the law consistent with the UN Convention. And it is the whole intention of the government not to penalize free speech or to control what takes place in cyberspace among ordinary people, but to ensure that we have the tools when criminal activities are conducted in cyberspace, that we can protect the people of this country, including our children, child pornography and all of that sort of stuff. So there is no intention whatsoever to, if you're getting into a fight with your neighbor and you're fighting in cyberspace, that the government will intervene, or if you criticize the government, somebody will charge you. Now, I see them talking a lot about this. Oh, the government is undemocratic and wants to control cyberspace. So, who passed the Cybercrime Act? I see Nigel Liu saying, implying that basically we have made a civil offense, or we intend to make a civil offense into a criminal one. So if you look at Articles 17, 18, and 19 of the Cybercrime Act that was passed under APNU in 2018, you will see exactly who criminalized basically libel. Because you could, in libel, there is a civil remedy. But now it's also a criminal issue. So that is why Leroy Smith could have sued or gone to court with Mudwater and got a judgment using the law that was passed by APNU. They're the ones who did this. And then they added another section about sedition. So I don't want to get into any great detail about this matter because I've asked the Attorney General to tackle this fully so that the people of this country are aware that though in 2018 we departed far away from the Budapest Convention. So they talk about Budapest now, but how come those provisions were inserted in the 2018 Cybercrime Act? Because at that time, APNU was intolerant to criticism, any criticism. They didn't want us to point out that, like what happened with Video Mega. If we had pointed that out in that time or so, they probably would have taken some more legal action against us had the no confidence motion not taken place. But they were on the back foot after the no confidence motion. But the act that they passed in 2018, that the AFC fully supported, and I don't know if Nigel Liu he was part of the AFC, his wife was a minister, they probably even consulted with him on the law, that they passed it fully. I don't mean fully, I mean they passed it with the full support of the AFC, not a single dissenting voice. Today, it's heaped on our doorstep. This is part of the revision of history. They criminalize basically a civil offense and now says, oh, watch out, this government is evil. This is what it wants to do. It was done under APNU. And they inserted the sedition. So you can commit sedition anywhere if you're abroad and you instigate the overthrow of the government, etc. They inserted those two provisions. So it's an attempt once again to revise the history. And Nigel Hughes raises it, and all of the others. Again, this is dishonesty. Dishonesty. It's dishonesty. It absolves them of the crime and then heaps the crime on the PPP now that we are trying to pass regulations consistent with international conventions that respect people's freedom of expression, but and do not infringe on their rights. So everything gets distorted in today's context. I like to address some of the Starbucks News stuff because I think they got these guest editors. Actually, it's becoming a little bit boring for me too, because they keep getting the same person to write the same stupid editorials all the time, and every week I have to point this out. So what they do to lend weight to the stories and the editorials, they will pick up anybody from around the world, from some institution, and quote that person. Out of context, in context, it doesn't matter. Quote that person, put in something that sounds like very erudite, an erudite quotation, or take what the person has said in relation to that another country and then try to apply it without context again to Guyana. So the last one was the need for deeper dialogue on the economy. And again, the chief economist of the Inter-American Development Bank, what he said about Trinidad and Tobago. And then try to switch it over to Guyana. So I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but just to say that unlike many of these countries, we have a homegrown plan. We don't rely, like APNU did in the period when it was in government, on a structural adjustment plan crafted by the multilaterals for Guyana, because we believe that their objectives were very different. The objectives of their program was stabilization and doctrinaire neoliberalism. Ours was development and people spending more on the social sectors. Their focus was on getting the balance right. That is how multilaterals operate. They want to see sustainable BOP. They want to see a sustainable fiscal deficit. They want to see reserve coverage of an appropriate level. That's their focus. Our focus was very different. But there is no, and I wish someone were to analyze how, because of that different focus, we were one of the success stories that emerged out of the period when structural adjustment policies and programs led by the IMF was the going thing, and which led to a failure in many countries in the world. We were one of the shining lights. We emerged from one of the most heavily indebted countries in the world to a long before oil and gas to that sustainability. Our economy expanded manyfold in that period because we didn't focus only on stabilization and doctrinaire policy. We tried to depart through our homegrown national development strategy. So we have our own strategy. We don't need an inter-American development bank to come and tell us what strategy we must pursue. Half of the technical staff there have never done or implemented at the country level, have no experience whatsoever. They may write a good paper, but they never have had to go through the ups and downs of development. So this is the approach, that a very different approach by the PPP. And sometimes we get criticized for it because we're not conformists. We're not conformists. We have insisted from the beginning we will chart a course for Guyana that is good for our people, our people. And so when they came in and said, don't build the Berbice River Bridge, because the same IDB brought a consultant in because he had gone to Miami and looked at a floating structure there and look at the maintenance costs. When he came to Guyana, did not even know we had a nearly 1 kilometer long floating bridge, that we had actual experience in Guyana of cost structures relating to maintenance. And he was coming up with something in Miami and did a report, and the report concluded we must not go with it. We went ahead with it. And finally, they relented, because if we didn't push back, the Inter-American Development Bank, if they had based their work on that consultant alone, we never would have had that bridge 17 years ago. The people would never been able to use it. So we push back against people. We don't take their word for gospel because they're from abroad, or maybe they're different from the developed world and they look different to us. We don't do that. And it's not arrogance, it's pride in being Guyanese. And we have a lot of the skills here to chart our own course. And trust me, it is the things that influence the plan, the development of the plans, etc. It's not a small group that sits in Georgetown. It's the intense interaction that we have had historically with the in the PPP with grassroots people. We don't need to filter the needs of the people through an NGO or through a newspaper editorial when we're on the ground all the time hearing directly from the people. And who matter most? It's the people of this country, not the couple who make a living in Georgetown through these NGOs from writing a few editorials. It's the people on the ground. And which party have you seen going into the communities, talking to young people, old people, talking about drainage and irrigation and everything? Which party has done that better than the People's Progressive Party, or in a scale as the PPP? So we're intensely knowledgeable about people's concerns because of our direct interaction with them. And that is why their concerns get reflected in our plans and our programs and the overall strategy. That's why the focus is on the things that matter to them: electricity, water, housing, employment, and all of those things. So we don't need a man who probably, I don't know if he's ever come to Guyana, to tell us about our plans that we must develop for our people, when they can tell us themselves what they need. And so they do this just to lend an intellectual ear to the articles and to the editorials. It means nothing to a person like me. It's hollow and stupid for me. It doesn't make any sense. I've seen hundreds of the similar views like these that we have dismantled and proven in the past as unsustainable or not appropriate to our country. So it might be appropriate to another country, but not to ours. And so, again, they pivoted from that straight to the gas to energy project back again. Now, their point is that, so they said, oh, we must discuss this project with in Parliament and civil society first. So we discussed the Amila plant at length. APNU killed it. Now we know it was all political, that they didn't even read the documents. Because to tell you they did not read the documents and they were supplied with all of the documents, maybe about 15 to 20,000 pages of studies that were given on flash drives in the era when Ramatar was president. I'd left office, was given to them. Meetings were convened at the office of the president. All the presentations were made about the technical feasibility, the financial feasibility, the environmental studies were done. They still killed it. And guess what they killed it for? That there would be $2 billion of debt, which was a nonsense. It would have been zero debt because we are buying power and we are not building the project. Zero debt. That was the prominent thing in Kaichor News and some others. Two, that the place would run out of water, the river would run dry. And you have droughts in many parts of the world with hydro, and yes, you do have low seasons. But that was the purpose of building a reservoir. You built a reservoir. There would have been a reservoir to store water. So you'd have seasons when like rainy season, when you generate about 1.3 megawatts of power, 1,300 megawatts of power, and then other times lower. Not megawatts, 165 megawatts. That would have been a bit, but the overall production could have been about 1,300 gigawatt hours to about 750 gigawatt hours, depending on the availability of water. But the lower end would have been more power than we were generating at that time. Patterson said in Parliament this year, in this budget speech, that the cost of power from Amila would have been 30 cents per kilowatt hour. He lied to the Parliament. It was 10 cents per kilowatt hour. It was killed because they did not want a successful project under the PPP. Like they don't want another success, the gas to energy project under the PPP again. But that one would have solved a lot of our electricity woes. They killed it, did nothing, absolutely nothing. Didn't start a new one. We went through that before. So they mentioned that about the editorial. So we must now go the gas to energy project and discuss it in Parliament before we started it. Of course, you know what would have happened. It would have never started. Now they said here, in the same editorial, it speaks about the largest, this is the largest ever expenditure on a public sector project. Is it financially feasible? Now, you gotta be an extremely stupid person to listen to all the explanations we've given and still question this. We pointed out that the entire project will be just over maybe about $2 billion. It has several components. We explain all the components: pipeline, NGL plant, power plant, transmission main, control center. We'd have 300 megawatts of power. That the cost of power will be about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. We're now generating power using bunker C, fuel mainly, and some diesel at nearly 30 cents per kilowatt hour. Do you need a degree or a financial feasibility study to understand this basic principle? If your cost of producing power is 4 cents per kilowatt hour versus 30 cents per kilowatt hour, then that's a no-brainer. You have to do that. So we're selling power now at 22 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're subsidizing the difference. That's why I told you that we're putting in 66 to 70 million US dollars to keep power at 22 cents per kilowatt hour, US cents. So it should have gone to 30 cents per kilowatt hour to cover the cost, but we are covering the increase in fuel costs from a subsidy. We said when we are completed, the project is completed, we will drop the price of power sold to people from 22 cents to 11 cents per kilowatt hour. So you're moving now, your 50% cut in your electricity bill, but we're still making money because we are generating at 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's not like GPL would not be making money. So how much does that translate in savings for Guyanese? It's over 100 million US dollars when you cut the power by half. It's as simple as that. So can we pay back? So they asked, what about its running costs over the life of the plant? And wouldn't this make inroads into the savings? How many times do we have to explain that the 4-point-something cents per kilowatt hour includes several things? It includes the amortization of the entire gas to energy project, so the pipeline paying back for the pipeline, the power plant, and the NGL facility. And it includes the running costs for the O&M costs, operation and maintenance costs. We've explained that as part of the 4-point-something cents per kilowatt hour. It's taken into consideration already. And then we further explained that from cleaning the gas, we will get a lot of liquids, the cooking gas included, that when sold, we can pay back for the whole project by itself. I've never seen a project this feasible in my life. If I had money, that's all, I would invest in something without blinking an eye. But these people, it's an intellectual kind of bullshit that they go on with every day. Every day, it's nonsense, pure nonsense. What don't you understand about these numbers? Oh, now would it come on stream? You think Exxon would put in $1 billion now of advance money if they didn't think this is feasible too? This is a big company. They're building the pipeline. You think we'd be focused? Oh, what about management? Well, we plan to have an O&M contract that is part of the 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And it will be with an international company that will generate the power and supply it to the grid, just, so we only collect the power and distribute it. So this is the problem we have. And every week it comes up. Every week it comes up over and over again. So, and guess who we must listen to? We must listen to a couple of NGOs that they've never invested a cent, would never create any value. In fact, they're PNC aligned. You know what's the biggest problem with them? They don't want this to happen. Because can you imagine people going to elections? They would love for this to happen after the election, but I don't care when it happens. It's going to happen. The people of this country will have stable power, they'd have cheaper power, and it would help industries, and they would save 100 million US a year. We don't care. We're working on it for the people of this country. You know who the biggest, they have the biggest problem with it? Political problem. Because PPP would be solving a problem now for people. And we got cheaper power, it may affect us politically. That is why they're after this project all the time. Now, the latest thing is Ashni Singh, in the same editorial, came back from Washington, met with Exim Bank, and we didn't hear much from Ashni Singh. So, Ashni Singh met with Exim Bank, and he's going to tell you about it. And they've indicated that they have all of the information that they need to go to the board. Now, when a bank like Exim Bank or any multilateral institution finances a project, they have to do due diligence on the project, internal due diligence. You can, anybody going for multilateral funding and who had the experience of doing so would know this. The people here think this is like a private bank. You can walk up tomorrow and borrow a loan and get the money. Anyone who has had a modicum, a tiny bit of experience with multilateral funding would know that before they go to their boards, they do their own due diligence on the project. So Exim Bank hired 2 consultants. Exim Bank hired a consultant firm called Rambo for the environment, and another one called Sargent and Lundy for the technical work. So they had to come in, and in the past several months, maybe a year or so, they have examined all the technical stuff. That is the drawings and everything else for the project. They have satisfied themselves that it's technically sound and have reported back to the Exxon management. The environmental consultants came in. They had questions. We answered all those questions, and they've gone back and said the project is environmentally sound. Those are the 2 things that were necessary. So when they go to their board, they would then say, we have done our due diligence. The project is technically and environmentally sound, because the financial case is already made. And it requires time. So some novice here would write, oh, we can walk in, call the head of Exxon and say, approve that project for us. And they will just come in or do that. If you had to go to IDB to get a loan now, from the time you identify the project to the time you get disbursement, often takes a year or 2. A year or 2. Actually, this is accelerated. That is how multilateral finances work. If you go to look at even the Islamic Development Bank, we had to do a ton of studies before they financed the Linden Soos Highway. The loan was approved only, I think, last year. And since we got into office, we've been working on that, because it's funded from a multilateral financial institution. They do due diligence before they go to their board, independent due diligence. Now this goes to their board, hopefully soon. They've indicated they're trying to make October. Then it has to be notified to the Congress for 35 days. Then it comes back to the board, Exim board, and then the loan is approved. That is how it works. That's the procedure of Exim Bank. We didn't create the procedure. They didn't create it for Guyana. That's their standard procedure. And the fact that we have gone through to their satisfaction all the technical and environmental issues, we passed the due diligence there. But here we need Janet Bulkan Melinda Janke to give us the approval, or Nigel Yu's relative who sued us over the project. That's what we need. They're clueless about anything, but we need, or maybe the Starbuck News editorial. This is how these things work. People who don't understand it, every week they write stupid things like this one that we've seen. And we need and clothe it in some intellectual garb. The next one is the Mordida syndrome. It's like this bribe taking and stuff like that. You know, this is, again, this is Rich coming from Starbuck News and an editorial. But as I said before, if you look at the change, I'm not going to go back what I said last week about the changes to public procurement that we brought on since we got back into office. And you remember, it was the same rumor thing, the same sort of rumors that they had in 2015, etc. But I'm not going to go back to all the changes that we have made because we've explained it 100 times. How we have gone to public tenders where we have clear evaluation rules. When there are departure, you've seen us go around the country saying people have to stick rigidly to the rules, the Procurement Act and the regulations. We have terminated contracts. We have canceled contracts. We've instituted liquidating damages. We removed, last week I spoke about the removal of a provisional sum that APNO had put in these contracts that was at the discretion of the engineers. So nearly 10% could have been siphoned off just like that without any recourse back to the tendering authorities because it was put in the contract to use at the discretion of the engineers. We've removed all of those things. The massive cleanup. We now put the contracts that we have awarded online. You go in the period between 2015 and 2020 and check online how many contracts that were awarded by the state, although it's a requirement of the act, were put on the website. They did not. So I'm not going to go back into this because this is something that seems intellectual again, but it's all, again, not nonsensical. I seen, I didn't weigh in much on the debate on the autocracy by Bharti Ramcharan because I think it was adequately dealt with. But I see he's found another book now to review, and I think he was slaughtered by a number of people who point out how shallow the analysis was in his article, particularly about Guyana, and how devoid of context and facts about Guyana. So now I see the Starbuck News has asked, or maybe they asked him to review Maurice Odell's book, Insight into the Guyanese Predicament. That's what it's called. So it concluded basically from Maurice Odell that the PNC wanted power sharing, but PPP did not. It distorts significantly the history of Guyana because Maurice Odell was in the bosom of the PNC, where if you start a book if you start a book review, you have to look at the author. This is the point that was made in the response to his earlier work. The author and where he comes from. What is his orientation, his bias in this case? So Maurice Odell was the head of NISL from 2015 to 2020. He was the head of NISL. So guess what happened in NISL in that period? NISL took over all of Gaisuko's lands. NISL then took money to build a luxury facility in Gaisuko compound that they were using for themselves when 7,000 sugar workers lost their jobs. The Watuka House in Linden, they spent tens of millions of dollars on refurbishing the Watuka House for some individuals, including chandeliers, etc. NISL transferred large tracts of land to a number of people, some who were charged for money laundering, without even collecting payment from them. that is, the title was transferred to the people without any payment, which is a criminal offense. I can go down the long list. Nissil gave away all the lands in Wales, sold out those houses. They sold out all the houses in Wales, some of them to politically connected people of APNU. And they gave away the lands, every bit of land, to a few individuals over there. I can go down a long list of the illegalities committed by Nissil in this period. Corrupt activities. Maurice Odell oversaw Nissil in that period. So this is the author. Do you think he would have anything benign to say about the PPP? He would not. So he distorts the whole context of this power sharing argument by making it seem, oh, APNU wanted to share power. I don't know when they wanted to share power, because they stayed in office through rigged elections for 28 years. That's a period. And in the 5 years, I didn't see any attempt to share power that period, too. Any serious attempt. So that's the conclusion. And the PPP has to, is the bad guy again. So I hope that Bharti Ramcharan will look at again at who the context of Guyana and also the background here. This is written from a very partisan perspective. And again, throwing in with some paragraphs, some balanced paragraphs to make it look like, you know, we're equidistant from the two parties. So we're enlightened. And because that's the fashionable thing to do. You know, you want to come after the PPP, so you do so aggressively, and then you throw in a couple things, some perfunctory criticism of the PNC or APNU to seem balanced. That is what takes place all the time. Our track record on power sharing, if Bharti Ramcharan wanted to do a proper analysis of power sharing, he should look at what we've said before, the engagements we have had with Corbyn when I was president. Secondly, the attempt to share power at the city council, where we agreed to have a rotating mayorship and how APNU behaved there. Thirdly, what we did in the constitutional reform process. If you were to look at the several provisions of the Constitution, which almost no country that I know of in this hemisphere, and maybe in the Commonwealth, has some of those provisions. The Five Rights Commission, on which we have to have consensus to name their members. The Public Procurement Commission, again, need consensus to elect their members. The Chancellor and the Chief Justice, again, you need consensus to appoint them, those people, to those two top posts. There are 4 standing committees to review government policies in the areas of social services, foreign affairs, natural resources, and economic services. The Parliamentary Management Committee, that has equal numbers now, unlike in the past, before the constitutional reform, equal numbers chaired by the Speaker. The involvement of the opposition more in the naming of the service commissions, the 4 service commissions. All of these things are features of power sharing. Power sharing at the level of the legislature. And it happened under the People's Progressive Party. We signed that into law. In fact, I signed it into the new constitution brought it into being, including term limits. So that gets ignored, totally ignored. And it could have only happened because of the enlightened nature of the People's Progressive Party. When we set up that Constitutional Reform Commission, we decided 5 for government, we're in government, 5 for opposition, and 10 from civil society. When we were in government, we could have argued we wanted more. When APNU came in office, they said they would have a Constitutional Reform Commission. They had a few APNU people and named Nigel Hughes as the chair. I think he was named as the chair, yeah, if my memory serves me correctly. Nothing came out of it. We promised again we'd have a constitution. If we want to update the constitution, we'll have a body made up like in the past with 5 from government, 5 from opposition, and 10 from civil society. We have done that again. Which party shows enlightened behavior? This is, if you really want to talk about power sharing, not the rumors coming out of Maurice Odell's book. So he engaged with the APNU, they wanted to share power. Have you ever heard them in Parliament when Amna Ali and the others used to scream, majority is majority, although they had one, a 1-seat majority? They used to shout that all the time. It's a careful rewrite of history, And we need to make sure that it's on. But I know a number of people will deal with that because they're very familiar with the era and all of this stuff. So I don't want to be too critical of Ramcharan, but I think he just, I don't know where he is now. I know he hasn't been here for the last 30 years, so I don't know if he's aware of what's going on and if he gets steered in this direction. I just wanted this culture news stuff. Government secretly inserts provision in LISA 1 and 2 on PIR permits to shield ExxonMobil from all spill costs. They have to learn to read and understand what's happening. Somehow there was the feeling that the guarantee covered all the costs. And what we have made clear here in this provision, that it excludes, that they're still liable for, but it excludes costs associated with compensation, that the guarantees cover only cleanup costs. Now this is a positive. They made it look like it's a negative, but it's a secretly inserted provision. It's in a public document. We put all of the documents out there, but it's nonsense again. It just doesn't understand. And then you've heard me say here, we missed that session of the last session of Parliament, but in the new session of Parliament, we intend to pass legislation to make all oil and gas companies and then to extend it to everyone else, like the transporters of our crude, etc., liable for all costs associated with any spill, including costs of compensation to people for loss of economic activities. And that legislation is in draft. We're discussing it now, and will go to the Parliament. These are, yes, I'll land here.
Dr. Jagdeo, good afternoon. Some of this is my own statement. You spoke about the role of the last judge. short project, less than some time, explaining that it's a process. But do you have a time frame?
I told you that they're aiming to go to the board. That's what was said to the minister by the October board meeting. But that all of the technical and environmental work has been completed, and they have all the information necessary to go to the board. Thereafter, they would have a 35 days notification. So that's what I said. But Minister Singh can explain that in greater detail.
Okay, the government is moving to make UG tuition free. A recent statement made by the Vice Chancellor, she stressed that the need for sufficient financing. She is saying that UG generates approximately 4 times more than the current subvention. When that period is finished, could we see an increase in the subvention?
Well, if we are taking it over, then that means all the costs carried by the people at the university now that through paying, through fees, will have to come to the treasury. And so it's a substantial cost. And that's why we made it clear. We're not APNU. We don't promise lightly. They promised to do it in a couple of weeks when they got into office. They increased the fees by 35% at UG. We said in the 5 years we'll do this. And that's why we believe we have the capability. We plan everything so the budget can carry these costs next year. We have to be careful that they're not pushing up costs now in this period between now and when we take over. Because frankly speaking, I think they just keep expanding the number of programs that they are doing. And I really don't know because we don't have a good feel. Personally, I don't have a good feel whether we are getting value for money. Because in the new programs particularly. Because if you're starting a program with a small number of people, it's sustainability and everything else. And there seems to be a fad. I may be wrong. It might be just an impression that's created based on the articles that I read. So I don't want to be definitive, and I hope it's not true. But when we have a more face-to-face meetings with the administration there, we should clarify these issues. But I hope that what I see in the newspapers getting reflected, this expansion all the time without, first of all, consolidating and then improving quality. You have to consolidate and improve quality and then expand. And then we don't have to do, since it's all public education, some programs that are better intermediated. The objective is to get tertiary education to as many people as possible. Not necessarily who delivers all of it. So UG will always have a critical role to deliver tertiary education, a prime role in our country. This is our university and we should keep it as such, and we need to fund it well and improve it. However, some programs can best be paid for. So for example, if you want to train 100, say, technicians, and it's 100 we need for 5 years. We might be able to buy that from another university and get all 100 trained now, than to now go and establish a new program immediately at UG. And so that sort of intense discussion needs to take place with the leadership of the university and the government of Guyana. First of all, we have a manpower plan now, which was done recently to look at how many people we need to run these 12 new hospitals. Oh, by the way, Starbuck was critical of the president for saying there'd be a new hospital at West Dem. So we have to replace the West Dem hospital. It's wooden, it's falling apart. You heard what we've said before. It's not off the top of the president's head that he made this announcement. We said we're currently building 12 hospitals, and we have to upgrade and replace some of the existing ones. So Bartica, Linden, would I see a 30 million US upgrade, Westdem. So we're building another hospital in Region 3, but Westdem is crucial. So we have to now replace it. So it might be better, because it's old and falling apart, to just replace it. But he gets criticized for saying that too by the editorial in the Standard News. Oh, did we think it through? Did we do a study? What study do you need to replace an existing hospital that is serving tons of people every day? Oh, we must hire a consultant to do a study for 2 years and then take it to the BHARRAT to sign off on it. And then the person who writes the editorial in the Standard News must say, yes, you need this. And then the government must implement it. So that's the position. UG, we will work with the administration. There will be adequate financing, but we have to focus on what best serves the needs of our country and the students. Those are our primary thing. How can we deliver the best quality education to the children going to university? Well, not children, everybody going to university, the people who get in there. So when they come out of there, the degree is highly respected and they can function in the workplace efficiently and they get good paying jobs, etc. That's the objective here. Yes, Dennis.
Mr. Gandhi, sir, could you say what are the expected or proposed outcomes from the visit by the Indian Cabinet this year? And what is the status of the establishment of the board that governs the production of hemp?
I don't, the hemp board, I think the minister has taken that to cabinet already. So I don't know if it has been passed by the cabinet, but I think so. It's passed by the cabinet. So hopefully the board will be in place soon, because we do need to move on this. There are lots of people that we work with and we want to work with particularly from the 2 regions we've identified, Region 10 and 6, to move it along. So I can always get that information back to you about where we are with the board. But I know it was taken to the cabinet. I'm now aware that it's implemented already.
Right. One person asked, what are the expected proposals?
Yes. So on the visit by Prime Minister Modi, I suggest you talk to the president about the expected outcome on that, because I'm aware that since President Ali was in India, there was a discussion of this visit. And so the outcome will be something if that visit takes place, is programmed from what I heard. Then there would be a negotiate, I guess the outcome would follow the discussions that take place at the meeting.
You don't have any major projects or
No. We're not. We have a good relationship with the Indian government. So if we have any project now, we don't have to wait the Prime Minister's visit to discuss that with the Indian government. So we have done a couple of things. We brought in our 30,000 solar panels through a loan from the Indian government that we had. And then we just ordered another 7,000 because in the riverine areas and some of the Amerindian communities, we didn't have enough. That's it. We're part of the Solar Alliance. We're working on defense cooperation, on technical assistance in many areas, in agriculture particularly. So there are lots of room for discussion, but I don't want to be premature and talk about issues that are not discussed as yet, or that may be just part of the government's thinking. These things, the outcomes have to be negotiated.
Mr. Jagadeo, within the last week or so, former Finance Minister Jordan had expressed a view concerning some proposed increases in salaries of teachers. Example, 10% in 2024, 50% in 2025, and 10% in 2026. My questions to you are, to what extent will these have a financial risk of any of the economy? And to what extent do you believe teachers' salary increases should be pegged to increments or appraisals?
So I just pulled up an article here. It's dated March 17, 2016. It's in the Kaichor News, and it has Jordan's picture there. And it's titled, "Don't Expect an Elaborate Increase," says Finance Minister to public servants. 2016, March of 17, 2016. They were arguing that the base was low in 2015 when we lost power. And he said in 2016, do not expect an elaborate increase. Finance Minister says that then. So, this is what he said. His warning in this regard comes on the heels of the report. So the IMF said we must suppress increase. This is what he says. As an economist and Minister of Finance, I can only say that I agree with the IMF on this front, to keep small increases to people. I've been advising and giving warning about how we are to address expectations for wage increases and exaggerated demands in this regard. In the good times, paying exaggerated salaries has serious long and short-term impacts. Trinidad and Tobago is feeling the effects of paying salaries which at one time seemed sustainable. You're talking about another oil and gas jurisdiction. He added, but given our economies, when we are exposed to the vagaries of the international market for our products, we can see that at one time price just dramatically falls and then you're left hanging. Then you have two options before you. You either cut salaries or cut employment. So to avoid being caught in that situation, one has to be extremely careful and prudent on matters of wage increases. This was 2016, he said. They claim they gave us 75% increase. It's false. The wage bill under the PPP has grown by $90 billion for the public service. I shared that with the media. I gave you a table in each sector, in the statutory bodies, public service, and on public corporations. I remember the Office of the President, I shared it out, and I said, look at this increase. $90 billion increase for in public sector wages and salaries. And now we get a lecture from Jordan. I pointed out that the 10% that they gave, which was the highest in 1 year percentage that they gave throughout their tenure to public servants, except the 50% that they took for themselves. That was not even 10% across the board. It was 10% for people who earned less than a particular sum. And then it went down to 1%, a sliding scale of 1 to 10. On average, it was about 6% for that year, but it looked like 10% across the board. They never given anything of that sort. I pointed out the base was different too. In 2015, teachers' wages and salaries were $15 billion. 10% at that time was $1.5 billion. Today, it's $40 billion. 10% is $4 billion. So when you look at quantum of resources too, what a 10% then versus a 10% now today. A 10% then would be equivalent to probably about 30% now. If you had to apply the same $4 billion to a 2015 base when he said that you had to be careful. This is the duplicity of someone. Maybe we could have paid higher if he didn't sell out all of the lands for peppercorn prices. Maybe all of that. And transfer the title without collecting any money for those lands. So my point is that we're getting closer to elections, and you would have, this is a trend. I pointed this out. So Annette Ferguson comes in and speaks about taxes when they have a dismal record on taxes because they're hoping people will forget. Marvin Williams comes in to talk about rigging elections. PPP wants to rig election, hoping we'll forget this. Jordan comes to talk about wages and salaries when they had a shoddy record. This is Jordan on record of talking about wages and salary. And furthermore, he said that the public service is 10,000 overstaffed. 10,000 overstaffed. He said that, Jordan himself. This is the same man who thought that the $18 million that we got in signing bonus was a gift. You look at his interviews. We got that on tape, and you can go back and look at it, that it was a gift to them. That's what he is on record. So he distorts that. Nigel Hughes weighs in, and he distorts the cybercrime law. We're the bad guys now. And they passed it and criminalized libel and put in a provision on sedition. And now we are the bad guys. A complete rewrite of history. And this is going to happen with increasing frequency. I saw the AFC put out an ad on housing. They put out some little ad. They went around and looked at some shacks around the place and said, we will do better than this. Better must come. They don't go down and look at all the houses being built. Look at the era 5 years under them when the AFC was part of the government. And you go down East Bank and see the large number of houses being built, low-income houses, middle-income houses, young professional homes, private homes. And you have the audacity, the shamelessness to talk about you will do better on housing. So my point to you, Dennis, is that we have done extremely well here. And we are mindful of that concern too, the sustainability argument. But we are arguing we got to go up progressively. That is why we've done it in a manner here. We're training our teachers more. 6,000 teachers now are trained of the 14,000 there on the enrollment now. And 2,000 of those were hired by us since we got back in office. So 6,000 of them, nearly half, are undergoing some form of training fully paid for by the government. We've increased the allowances for people who are better qualified. Degrees, first degree, second degree, doctorate, you get a bigger allowance now. We're encouraging teachers to train more because we want better quality tuition here. We've increased our budget for education by from 53 billion to 135 billion. Look at the schools we're building. The president has been opening several schools, not on the coast and in the hinterland. New, better facilities for our children, etc. So I don't pay too much attention to people like Jordan when they come out to talk about it. I just read you what he said. This is a man in 2016 when there should be raring to give people the high salary increase. Just come off elections. and promise the people massive increases. You go and check their manifesto and then saying, don't expect no elaborate increase here. And they got a 6% across the board. In the year after they promised people massive increase. When you look at the 10 to 1, it works out to about 6% after they promised the massive increase on a low base. So
what I was trying to get at, I heard you talk about sustainability, but could you elaborate in terms of some actual numbers? Why government appears to be reticent to even going ahead with some of these recommended increases? And secondly, he's challenging your figures as far as increases in salaries and employments are concerned, citing work teachers being employed, promotions, etc. Do you buy into those?
yeah, but we're looking, sustainability has to look at the wage bill. How much is affordable? So what about their period where they talk about 75%? You go and look at every year. So in the 5 years, the average wage increase was maybe 6 to 8%. How could you get 75% increase in the 5 years that they say they give the public servants? 75%. Because the wage bill increases too. So what happens is that, yes, the wage bill has increased significantly from, I think, about $120 billion to something like 200 and something billion dollars. I can't, you have the numbers, but they totaled up to $90 billion. I shared the list with you, and you see 2015 and 2020, and now where it is. We have, so it means that in the public sector, people are taking home now $90 billion more per year than they were taking home in 2020. That is what it means. In the whole public sector, $90 billion more goes into the pockets of the people who work in the public sector per year than we're getting in 2020. So you also have to look at the macro figure to look at sustainability. And that is what we believe. There's been a massive growth already in the period. And this is something that we have to look at. But that is what I say to people. When you assess us and how people are today, so in the private sector, you have about 60,000 more jobs. And that means people are out there. The same people who are working, I'm so proud of them, like the Guyanese at the Starbucks and stuff like that. They're just like putting a lot of hard work. I go there and watch them, you know, they're just, I'm really proud of the people. At Marriott, that place that they said they would turn into a hospital, if you go in there, it's mainly our people doing a great job. And they're earning in many, many places like that. They ask where the 60,000 jobs coming from. I can tell them, I can assess it. 60,000 people more working. Just imagine how much more they're earning than they were not earning in 2020. Probably running into maybe $50 billion or something like that per year. Then in the public sector alone, we have a $90 billion per year increase in wages and salaries. So that alone, imagine the disposable income available to our people. If we assess it at, say, 50 and 90, you have now 140 billion more per year in disposable income. That's a lot of money. That's a lot. That's a 700 million US, around that. More in the pockets of our workers per year now. I'm not speaking about the businessmen and how much money they make in profits. I'm just speaking about wages and salaries in people's pocket. So when you see people shopping at the mall and stuff like, now I must confess, not everyone has benefited from this. You do have poor people who have a hard time. You do have a lot of poor people, but you have people who have moved into the middle class because of the changes. And our job now is to make sure that all of those who didn't get the opportunities as yet, that we gave them the opportunities through education, assistance with housing, to bring them up into the middle class. That not a single person must be left behind. But it can't happen at once. We can't fix all the pit latrines immediately. Nigel Hughes has an obsession with pit latrines. I saw he posted it back again. We can't fit it overnight, but that's the aim. So we acknowledge that there are lots of people who still need that help. But when you look at the face of it, that's $700 million more in the pockets of our workers per year, US dollars. When you look at the local content law, they now, over 1,000 Guyanese companies now are earning money there too. So that's hundreds of millions of dollars again. But they're earning it not just employment, but as profits. So they have that as disposable income at the company level. And so you see that happening around the country. And particularly in some of the regions where, like region 3 and 4, where most of the economic activities are. You hear us acknowledge when I go and speak with people in Berbice or in 10 or in the hinterland, I say, we haven't been able to bring all of the prosperity out here as yet. It will come, but we're working on it to make sure that we build facilities that will push investments in those areas. But when you try to build it, open up at Palmyra, which would have an impact on 5 and 6, it's unsustainable. So coming back to your key point, Dennis, I believe that we are looking at sustainability, and our track record on public service wages. APNU speaks the loudest about public servants. But when you look at real track record, then you would see that the PPP public servants have always fared better under the PPP. You remember mass retrenchment under APNU? They had a policy of mass retrenchment. They had a freeze on public sector wages in the past. That party had a long history with public servants. This is the party that sent home 7,000 workers, sugar workers. When did we ever do that? When they left Lynn Mine and they were closing it with Minproc, we didn't send home those workers penniless. We doubled their severance pay that they were not even entitled to. And then we worked to get investments to rehire them. When in the Berbice River, they chased away the investors. You had 1,000 people who lost their jobs there in their bauxite operations. That's just before the last elections. That's their history. I wish Jordan will talk about that.
Is there a third arbiter for the legislature?
Yes, they will. I must say that I thought they were visiting. The arbitration panel was visiting last week, but I was told that it's in October that the visit will take place by the arbitration panel.
You don't know who's the third arbiter?
No, please find out from Brassington. I don't keep track of all of these arbiters. I know the panel is fully composed now, and they're visiting in October.
IHS and Exxon says to go to expert source for arbitration?
No, we have to determine that. And there is only one way forward, basically, because they have I gather they're sending documents to us now to address those concerns. And I said to the ministry, we've long gone past that stage. There was a time period for that. This is on the first audit. We now have to trigger the provisions under the PSA, which means some form of a mediated settlement or arbitration. So we've gone past the issue of clarifying between the two parties cost. We have a dispute over $214 million. That should not be part of the cost bank.
Dr. Jagdeeo, Cordell Jones from Nigerian News.
Yes.
There has been concerns from a large section of society about the
And I think those concerns should be best addressed to the Chancellor of the Judiciary, because we are ready to prosecute. We have all the evidence to demonstrate that there was a coordinated attempt laws, the PSA, the permitting, we have addressed every one of those concerns through this. Don't become just like the other reporters. It's a stupid question. Because I just told you we were uncomfortable with that. That is why we changed it. It's logical. Sometimes you use your brain too. And the thing is that I told you we were uncomfortable. We saw it as something that is not desirable in a PSA. So how would we be comfortable with it if we found it undesirable? You're going to be undesirable and comfortable. So please,